Hey y'all, today we are going to make this bead rolled panel for the Willomet charger. Well, not this exact one, I already made this one, but we're going to make one more, number 7, and I only need 2. So the thing that we're doing here, just very briefly, on the Willomet charger, remember cars and Mopars back in the day are unibodies, and that means that the body and the frame are one piece. When I put the frame in the car, I put a frame in a car that never had a frame. So now I have to make the body attach to that frame, and that means all these little sheet metal connectors I have to now replace. Among these are some parts that go from what you'll call the rear package tray, which is kind of like what goes between the rear inner fender wells. Instead of it being, tube like a roll bar, it's all sheet metal. Now that's both, a feature and, also kind of a flaw of the old unibody is that you put the sheet metal in kind of like the right order, it can be pretty all right for a passenger car, but definitely not tough enough for the kind of pro touring stuff that I want to do. Anyway, all that to say, in order to put the car back together and have it stay square and make the body match, so all hook up nice and square to the frame, I have to make lots of little plates like this. Now, this particular plate, I have made a few times before. Specifically, this is number 6. And the reason that I made 6 is because, well, I had to kind of teach myself how to bead roll. And, I went to YouTube, looked up a couple of things, but also just kind of started to let my brain work on how all this was going to go together. And the first 4 efforts were good. Number 3 and 4 are actually sitting in the car right now. And what I'll tell you is number 3 and 4, when I was done with them, here's the very first one I made. And about like number 3 and 4, I had like gouge marks here at the edge, and it was it's kind of like a little wobbly like a potato chip. And all that is because bead rolling by its definition, like all metal forming and bending, introduces stress into a part and either shrinks or stretches the metal. In order to get a bead rolled panel like we've seen on race cars and pro touring builds, to get that stuff, have the bead rolled edge like I want, but not have it be the potato chip effect, in order to do that, really, you've got to introduce some pre-stretch. And what I'm going to tell you is, I don't think that there's another way to do this. I'm not a pro bead roller, right? So don't think that this is like some sort of according to Hoyle class. I'm just telling you what I figured out, and I'm a regular guy builder like y'all. And I've got some regular guy tools to make my very best version of race car stuff. So let me show you how I made the first one, what I learned from it, and how we're gonna make last one, number 7, to fit the car, and it's gonna be really nice and neat looking. Okay, so all of this really relies, these panels, they really rely on getting good templates in place. That's not the focus of our video here, but I'm just gonna say, I did all this stuff on a paper template, and you just want to transfer your paper template to steel and cut it out, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm using shears and this bandsaw here, but I transferred this pattern to steel, used some layout fluid, and then I'm able to follow along this scribe and cut it out. This is basically just acetone in an aerosol. Just be smart about these chemicals, either wear a glove or use 2 rags like I'm using. This is just the importance of having patterns and continuing to go back to your original pattern every time you want to make these. Because I use the same pattern, obviously reversed, to make number 6 versus here number 7. They're just mirrored from one another. And then you can see I have a different windowing right here. I changed my mind halfway through it, but didn't make a new template. The reason that you have to do this ahead of time is because as soon as you put the bead roll in it, you can't access this material anymore, not without screwing up your bead profile. Yeah, you can shrink along these sides and try and flatten it out, but you're still not putting in the, let's say, correcting stretch or shrink on the part that you've done the work to. You'll lose access to this as soon as you put it through the bead roller. So therefore, you got to do all this work before. And what we're going to use is the English wheel. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. You could use a planishing hammer, forming hammer. You could use body hammers. All that stuff is in bounds. This is just a very smooth and elegant way, and it does it in a perfectly straight line. When I say regular guy's tools, this is not the big cast iron, very, very nice English wheel from, you know, some of the really nice catalogs. This thing's from Northern Tool, and it is super affordable like all the other tools that are right here. The way I've got it set up, I've got the high crown here on the bottom. This is the highest crown one that's in the kit. And then you'll also notice I've got the band, I have my rubber band on here, but it's up and out of the way. And this is just a normal flat 9-inch, or 8-inch rather, wheel here on the top. I've also got mine a little bit modified, as you can see, so that my boots, I don't kick it here with my shoe. So all we're gonna do is line this up, and I am going to only, along these lines, I'm gonna put a nice high crown pre-stretch right along here. I'm not gonna go too far past this point because you don't need to put any stretch over here. You're not working the material there. You're only going to bead roll this line. Therefore, we're only going to put a line in that direction. And I'm only going to go in this direction. I'm not going to get too worried about the angles actually, because when you look at it afterward, you'll see that they overlap pretty strongly. So I like to come up and give a pretty good bit of pressure. And then let the cam put the final pressure on there. And all we're going to do is pretty slowly work this, and you'll actually after just a pass or two, you'll be able to see the crown come up on it. The way this works is you always turn the opposite direction from what you think. It's like backing up a trailer. And I got to thank my buddy Greg for showing me the basics on this. What are you doing, puppy dog? What are you doing, sweetie? So you can see.
Anybody notice this little girl?
Oh, they may not. This is Aura Lee. That's the name we use when she's being a good girl, like right now. We got her from Dallas Animal Services, and she's just a sweetie. All she wants is to be pet, and she's sweet. Harriet is helping train her, as are we. So here's one pass. Notice I don't go to the outside because we're not bead rolling out here. We're only bead rolling in here. So that's a nice crown, if you can see that. That's a pretty nice little crown that's on there. I actually think it's hard for you to do this too much because you just reach the limit of the lower anvil. So it's got a pretty good crown on it. You don't need to do it a whole bunch. You saw I did, I don't know, 10, 20 back and forths. And that's about all you need. It's just a little bit of work. Because we're doing, this is a 1/8-inch step wheel, so we don't have to do a bunch of it. It's not a super deep draw. Now I'm going to do these 3, and through the magic of video, see how it's got that nice big crown on it? It's just shrunk right here on the inside of these lines. I say shrunk, it's stretched. Yes, sweetie. Yes, sweetie. And what we're going to do now is we're going to feed this in, and we're going to. What? Okay. We're just going to give it the lightest pressure to set the line, set the marking line, and we're going to probably have to do 4, maybe 5 passes to get this 20 gauge to draw correctly. It's kind of arbitrary where you start. I like to start on a straight line right after a curve, and I set my blue line on the inside here of this die. These dies, which are a little modified from their original, I put a pretty good radius on them, or rather to make sure that they didn't gouge too much. And you just kind of get, you're almost feeling for snug. It's like you want to, this is almost like a screw that you want to get like pretty tight, so a little fat past finger tight, and you're looking for snug, about like that, just a little bit of pressure. And then not everybody does this, but I do tighten down the bearing block on the outside because I don't want things to wiggle and walk. And this is a very technical lighting system that I've got for a work light. Just make sure you've got a work light or eat a bag of carrots because you need to be able to see that little line right there. And you do have to hold this one up with your hand. Fancier bead rollers have tables, but we're regular guys and we have hands.
I wanted you folks to see this first pass through the bead roller in real time, so stick with me through this section.
And it is most awkward, I am not going to lie, getting this first part just dialed in.
I used this first pass to set my travel path and put the slightest bit of shrink into the material.
That's what I mean when I say awkward.
The straight sections are easy enough, and you just need to apply a little bit of extra focus to maintain a consistent pressure in the corners.
The only reason I can do this with confidence is because I've made 6 of these before. And even then, I don't have a lot of confidence around it, but I do have some practice.
As challenging as this is the first few times, I think you'll quickly come to enjoy the process. And that's really the point that I'm trying to make. The only way to learn to do something is to start doing it. Make mistakes, make more mistakes. Learn from them all, and remember that the obstacle is the path. And before you know it, you will be pretty good at this.
All right. It's still got a little wave in it, but that's to be expected because we just put our first real shrink in it.
I think I ended up doing 5 passes to make this panel, each one working the material a little more until I bottomed the dies, which don't crank way down on that last pass. Back off just a bit so you don't wear out the adjuster screw or overwork the panel.
This should be the final pass. You can start to see some of the little machining marks that are on the dies transferring, making witness marks on the work. And that's how you know you're basically just, at this point, squishing the material. The dies are as close together as they can get. And I'm just going back over kind of the starting line here just to make sure, yeah, nice and even. Now, you may already be able to see it from the angle you're at, but this is pretty flat. Emphasis on pretty flat, like it's not perfect, right? Remember, we're regular folk doing regular work in our garage. But I tell you what, it's a darn sight better than the potato chip you saw earlier. And what I'll show you here, look at that. The only thing that we've got to do is a little bit of planishing to bump these corners down, and that's it, man.
Now, you folks know I don't skip on PPE. Take care of your hearing and be sure you've got some earplugs that are actually rated for noise reduction.
So over here at my grandfather's anvil, and I've got right now what is a low crown body hammer. This is honestly my favorite, this Martin 153G as in gamma. And all we're going to do is line this guy up. I got a nice couple of edges right here, and I'm just going to start bumping it flat. I like to go slow because I don't want to, harm this line, but with just a little bit of downward pressure.
Bumping with a hammer can be very, very effective. So take it slow and check progress as you go along.
It's important not to just go for the ting-ting. You don't want to crush the oil can this material. You're just trying to bump it and just move it, right? So time is your friend. Favor more lighter strikes versus a couple of woo-pows, And then I'm going to hit the corners last, get these things straightened up. You can feel a little, rise in the corners just right here, but it's literally just
In hindsight, I would have started at the corners with the high crown hammer and a wood backer,
just a couple of bumps.
and then come to the anvil with the low crown. But it still turned out okay doing it this way.
It's hard to see from your angle on video because like everything on a screen gets washed out into 2D, but this is flat. So this guy is, I'm gonna say like 95% done. I've got a little bit more that I want to hit right here just to flatten some stuff out. I'm gonna spend some time on the anvil doing it. But the point being is I wanted to show you that we can make some real race car kind of stuff with some very accessible and regular tools. This bead roller and English wheel, they're not out of the reach of any one of us. And you can make stuff that we see on cars that we look at on the internet all day long. Like when I'm done doing that little bit of high crown work and just making sure that this is nice and flat, what I'll probably come back with is I'll hit it with with my dual action sander and get the kind of texture that I really like, which this is, if you ever see me making stuff and it's got a DA finish, it means I'm done. That's kind of what I like. My encouragement to you is go find this stuff. You can find it on Marketplace, you can find it used very easily, or if you can find a deal and maybe even spring for it new, then by all means go out there and get started. There's nothing holding you back from just getting out there and trying it out, all right? So until next time, I appreciate y'all being here, and take care.